Every year across America, children are enrolled in schools in hopes of receiving the best education to pursue their dreams in college and lead a good career. However, numerous schools in areas with a large population of racial minorities often receive less than sufficient funds.
There's certain other students or certain other people who may have more access just because they may, have a more privileged family or whatnot. I'm sure higher education is really starting to really think of, but I think that that's something that we need to always be considering, that certain students just aren't born at the same level playing field as others.
Rod Chetty, an economist and professor at Harvard, led a research study on the affluent college acceptance rates on students from differing socioeconomic schools. According to Chetty's paper, Diversifying Society's Leaders, out of students who score in the 99th percentile in standardized tests, over 30% of students from wealthy upper-class backgrounds are accepted into these highly selective colleges, whereas about 10% of students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are accepted. In addition, Ivy League colleges recruit over 13% of student athletes from the top 1%, compared to only 5% from the bottom 60% income level.
What they found was there were multiple factors that made students from more affluent backgrounds stand out, but one of them was engagement in extracurricular activities and the types of extracurricular activities that they were engaged in. Students are getting, viewed differently because they engage in those sports. So like lacrosse and field hockey and swimming and golf and tennis, right? So, and that more affluent students were more likely to be engaging in those sports, the sports that were more expensive to play, that was giving them an advantage in the admissions process that students from less affluent backgrounds didn't have access to.
These differences in available sports are due to funds received in certain areas which historically have been separated. This segregation of neighborhoods in America arguably first started with the practice of redlining. Redlining is found in almost every major city in America, coast to coast from New York to Houston to Chicago, typically separating the neighborhoods into 4 categories. Type A's were the wealthiest suburbs on the outskirts of cities where the richest families. Type B's were less desirable but still middle-class neighborhoods. Type C's were declining lower-class neighborhoods, and Type D's were neighborhoods admitting African Americans along with some Jewish people, poor immigrants, and low-income working status. The local government would be pre-inclined to take less interest in Type D neighborhoods due to them being seen as hazardous and undesirable, furthering a lack of funding already caused by even the neighborhood's wealthier African American population having to struggle more to earn a living due to racial bias in the workplace.
Redlining certainly contributed to white flight, to white people moving out to live in more racially homogenous areas of greater wealth. And today, those are the school districts we see that can spend many thousands of dollars more on students than big urban school districts.
The schools in these poverty-ridden areas that are underfunded pose a major disadvantage to students, often immigrants or racial minorities, who need to compete against wealthier students due to the imbalance of resources. While the American dream teaches us that economic status shouldn't matter in the face of skill, it would be ridiculous to suggest that the rest of those students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds had any less inherent potential to succeed than their wealthier peers. These education system injustices are so subtle that it is easier for people to ignore them, making it an easy sprouting point for subtle racial inequities everywhere.
Oftentimes, we assume that everybody has equal access to an education and that should be sufficient in terms of determining access to college. But it's really hard to perform well in school if you are food insecure. It's really hard to perform well in school if you're housing insecure.
In an American democracy, we are all responsible for ensuring an equitable reality for all students in America. We cannot stand by waiting for politicians and people higher in power to reform the system. We need to incite change.
Reach out to your state legislators. I think advocacy, finding other organizations that are doing this work to partner with them.
Encourage folks to think more broadly about what involvement and engagement looks like.
That's the big piece, is just that policy, that advocacy route. Reach out to different community members to garner community support.
The African American Community Service Agency is a San Jose-based organization driven to provide resources to African American youth. The local Sacred Heart Community Service is also a great option to give back to the community. The privileged especially should look for ways to help those who have less resources and opportunity, as this strengthens the community and fosters an inclusive culture in America. Regardless of citizenship, racial identity, economic status, or educational background, everyone can and should at least help to make a difference.